Hi everyone, and welcome to the Publishing Performance Show. I'm here with Nicole Janz, who is a book coach. I'm really excited to speak to her all about being more organised with your book writing. So thank you for joining me, Nicole.
Of course, happy to be here, Teddy.
Thank you. So let's get straight into it. I mean, many writers struggle with their procrastination and not really writing as fast as they want to. So what are the main reasons that a lot of writers do procrastinate, and how can they overcome that?
Yeah, so there's always sort of the surface level reasons for procrastination. Often they say, I can't find the time to write. I don't know how to tell my story, or I have too many other goals in my life, too many other things that are super important. And, you know, this is more from the productivity side. But as a book coach, I've sort of found that there are deeper layers. And I've actually found that procrastination is pain avoidance, because there's often when you write and you want to do a really good job, you want to really make an impact with your book and your story, you often think maybe it's not good enough. You can get overwhelmed easily, or the imposter is knocking at your door, and that can be painful when you feel like, you know, it's not going that well. And when something is painful, we don't want to go there. So it's so much easier to do emails, admin, other projects, focus on your family, maybe on your day job, to just avoid the pain. And I found as a coach, I'm often a little bit of a life coach or therapist. And when we go into, okay, what is the actual problem here? We realize they can make more time once they figured out what deep inside sort of held them back, where the pain was sitting.
Yeah, that is such a good point. I'm such a I'm so bad at procrastinating. Well, I'm good at procrastinating. I mean, you know, I'll be waiting to do something useful, like write a book, and then suddenly, next thing I know, I'm just responding to emails or, you know, working on something that I actually enjoy. So, have you got any tips for trying to break down those tasks so that you can overcome that procrastination a bit faster, especially to do with books?
Yeah. So I think once you've sort of looked a little bit at what am I afraid of here, you can't really push that away immediately. You can't just say, oh, yeah, I'm not going to be afraid that it's not good enough. But while you are sort of living with and sort of getting comfortable with the discomfort, you can do a lot of little practical things that can get you back into the writing. And some of them are just making the goal smaller. For example, when I wake up in the morning and I think, oh, I need to write this whole book, of course I'm scared. The mountain is huge. But if I set my goals, you know, at the start of the week, and I think of a small thing that I can do every day, even just, let's say, for 10 minutes or for 30 minutes, doing a bit of research, writing 200 words, like teeny tiny tasks, then it seems more manageable. And this is what I do with all my clients. We go through the whole week and we find little things they can do. And of course, you can write 50 words. Of course, you can research another book and see what their style is. And suddenly they can get out of their block and just complete these smaller tasks.
Yeah, I really like that point. I mean, I read a really good book called Creativity. It's by John Cleese. He's quite a famous British comedian. And it's a really small book, but it just talks all about his writing process when he was writing Monty Python and Fawlty Towers and things like that. And one of the things he said was a bit like what you touched on just now about setting those goals maybe the night before about what you're going to work on the next day. Because sometimes when you do it the night before, your brain kind of works on it whilst you're asleep and you wake up and you've really got that momentum to push forward. Is that something you've sort of noticed when you've been working on procrastination?
100%. I heard the saying, never go to bed without a request to your subconscious. So if you set your goals the night before, something in your brain will start sort of digesting, and you never know what happens when you wake up. I've had it a million times that there was some sort of problem in the writing that I was doing. I'm also a writer. And I just felt like I can't really, how do I say this? And I just journaled a bit about it. I set myself a goal for the next day to tackle that. And then in the morning I woke up and I had a very clear idea. This is how I'm going to try it. Now, it doesn't mean that this was always the best way of doing it, but I just felt like, okay, that's my first step. And then from that, it kept rolling and I kept playing. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And with books in particular, you mentioned breaking down those goals. What are the goals you generally recommend people start working with when they are starting to plan a book?
Yeah, so I have a sort of 5-step process when I start working with clients, which I also put into a free mini course, Start Your Book in 5 Days. And so the easiest way to start is with a few simple questions that you are journaling about. You want to figure out what's the key message of your book. You want to figure out who really needs to hear it. So imagining a person that is your main audience, thinking of a person you might even know who really needs to hear this because they might have a problem to solve. They might have some pain points. There might be something not going well for them and they want to see if they can tackle that, right? So what is that problem that you are trying to solve? And then also thinking about why does it matter in a bigger sense? So just, I know a lot of people who want to write books, but you need to be really clear what will change for your reader when they read the book. How are they going to see life differently? How does their perspective on life change? Or, their day-to-day actions, how does that change? And so
Yeah.
these are often questions that are easy. You can answer them quickly. And often your initial gut reaction for such a question is probably the right one rather than overcomplicating it.
Keep it simple is the answer.
Yeah. I have a lot of clients who actually have 4 or 5 books in their head, especially professionals or entrepreneurs and even authors. And they try to put everything into one. And if you bring it down to give me 5 minutes, here are 5 questions to figure out the book, suddenly they realize, well, I just have to think about the first book for now, knowing that I might potentially be writing a series of books.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, I read an interview of J.K. Rowling the other day, and she has like 4 books in her head at the moment, which she's kind of plotting through at any one time. So yeah, I think keeping it simple is a really good tip there. Now you've got this book. I've got it here. It's really good. It's called The Right Habit, and I say it's a book. It is a book, but I mean it's more of a planner, and you can see some of the pages here. And I can't believe how detailed and how much information there is in here, all about planning your book. I think it's absolutely incredible. It'd be such a good resource for people who are planning on writing a book. So let's talk a bit about that book. So firstly, what got you into writing that book in the first place?
Yeah, the Right Habit Planner used to be actually a self-help book called The Right Habit before it became a planner. And it was a book that I wanted to write for all my clients and all my potential clients who struggle to set their writing goals on the day-to-day basis, who struggle to really figure out how to break down their big goal into a time plan that works. And I had planned out a whole self-help book with tons of tips on how to do this, bringing all my coaching tools into it, all my client stories. And sort of halfway in, I realized it's way too complicated. I don't think my writers need to read another book on how to do it and stress them out and overwhelm them with too much detail. And then I abandoned it, felt actually really bad about it because I'm a writer's coach giving up a book. But I thought about what does a person who wants to sit down and write productively and consistently, what do they actually need? Unless me, other than me being in the room with them to help them. And then I realized actually they need a planner, but not just any productivity planner, or there are so many planners for wellness and journals, but a planner specifically for busy writers who find it hard to write every single day, with boxes to fill in the priorities, breaking down the goal, filling in how they spend their week, recap on what they've done, and sort of suddenly everything became very simple. And that writer's planner was finished really quickly because I knew that I just knew that what's the absolute basic, the absolute minimum someone needs to have. And boom, there it was. It was a planner. It was easy. It's out. And it's selling too.
Do you still have the actual book, The Right Habit, or is it just the planner now?
So the book is sitting there dormant, and I am thinking about writing it, but in a much more lighter version, much more space on the page, a few simple exercises, taking out all the complicated stuff, because as a coach, and I've worked with coaches, you are full with frameworks and little tricks and tweaks because every person you work with is different. And I think all of that needs to essentially be kicked out to then come back to a very simple version. So maybe one day I will I will finish it. For now, people are just so keen on the Right Habit Planner that
Yeah.
I'm very happy because they are actually writing. I can see people, they send me screenshots of their goals and they book into my programs and they tell me that it's working. So I sort of don't really want to mess around with it too much because the
Yeah.
product is, successful at the moment.
It's yeah, I mean it's fantastic. I mean, the reason I ask is because most people when they're writing books, they do it in the way that you've done it, but the planner is kind of an afterthought, and it's a way of maybe just making a few extra sales rather than being the main event. Whereas for you, it feels like you have done it where you've written the book and then the planner afterwards, but the planner has been by far the most thing that's taken off compared to the book. So I thought it
Yeah.
was really interesting that, and it shows that maybe people shouldn't just write these planners as an afterthought. They should really think about writing them as a proper book. Now, when you're planning to write a book, what are the first steps you recommend an author take during the planning process in order to get their book off the ground?
Yeah, so other than sort of figuring out, the premise, the who, what, why, audience, and all of that, I think the author should try and come up with a preliminary outline that will probably change while you are writing, but without an outline that where each chapter has a very clear idea, one key point, one story, one action step. I'm thinking very much of self-help while I'm saying that, right? So sort of trying to plan out each chapter and thinking about how you are taking the reader through the journey, because a reader doesn't want a big blob of information thrown at them. It's like when you are coaching or, teaching a course or something, they need things in bite sizes. And so often you want to think about, well, a person is picking up my book. What is the easiest way in for them? Like a tiny thing, a little mindset shift, something simple that they can get on board with, a little hook. And then in the next chapter, you would think about, well, now that they know this, what is the next question they might have? What is the next sort of feeling they want to get? And then sort of you try and get a flow through the outline. And it will not be perfect at the start, but it's something really to think through. How are you taking the reader by the hand as if you were having coffee with a friend? You would never just give a monologue of 2 hours. I mean, maybe some people would, but it's often a back and forth, like, oh, that's interesting. And so what is then the next thing? And so taking them through that journey, that also helps you as an author to figure out what's part of this book and what will be part of the next book. But it also creates a much better way for you to then turn these chapters into milestones and a time plan. And suddenly everything, as I said earlier, becomes sort of a bite-sized endeavor for you as a writer and then for the reader as well.
Is there a difference between writing a non-fiction and a fiction book in setting those timelines, do you think? And can your book help both people do that?
I think there is no difference in the writing process. I have worked with a novelist. She just finished 100,000 words. I'm also working with a self-help author. He finished 40,000, 50,000 words. And I applied the exact same methods to them. The content, of course, is different. With a novel, you think about the character, the plot, how the character changes in a specific scene. But in nonfiction, maybe there isn't a character, but there is still the reader who is sort of the hero of that story. They are still trying to change something for themselves. And so, apart from the content, where you have to dig a little bit deeper on what's going on in the book, the writing process for the author, setting milestones, tracking what you're doing, breaking it down, making it easy, finding flow, developing your own system to find flow, writing consistently, all these things are absolutely vital to get to the finish line. Otherwise, it's always just going to be an idea of a book and not a first draft.
Yeah, no, of course. And that's what I think's so nice about the book. It breaks it down into sections where you can set, for example, like your goals, like what you want to aim for with that goal. And then you can then break it down into, different chunks you can do. For example, your monthly goals, your weekly goals, when exactly you're going to write. Do you think that organization is really important, setting exactly when you're going to write and what those goals are going to be for those writing sessions?
I think so. I've seen a lot of people that I worked with before they came to me, they had a half-written book, or actually that's not quite true, but sort of like the first chapter, the first two chapters written years ago, sometimes 8 years ago, 5 years ago. And when the initial excitement and the novelty effect falls away, then they didn't really get to the writing anymore. They didn't have that system of how they organize their writing. And you wouldn't believe how many people I have with a started book who never finished, and they thought, oh, I have writer's block. I don't think they really had writer's block. I think they just didn't have the system to do it. And with the planner that I created, it's meant to really make you think about what are your priorities for the month, what are your priorities for the week, and it takes into account how the rest of your life looks. For example, if you are an academic and you have a full week of marking, 1,000 essays, you can sort of tick that off in your Write Habit Planner as a week with very low engagement with your actual research writing and papers and articles, because that is a week that you're just not going to be as active. You're just going to be too busy and you might just burn out. And so the planner is made in a way that you do also get to think about the other stuff going on in your life, and then how you still bring in writing in those weeks where it's possible without getting too overwhelmed.
So rather than having a writer's block, it's actually, if you know you're going to have a busy week, you can plan for that in future, and you can say, you know what, I was quite busy that week. I don't have to be too hard on myself that I didn't do any writing. Let's schedule the work around that.
100%. Oh man, I have so many clients who come for the first one or two meetings and they are beating themselves up. They have this whole story about themselves not being disciplined, not having the willpower, slacking and not being a good writer. And this story is sitting in your head. And of course, then you feel frustrated. Why didn't I write last week? I had a holiday. Why didn't I write in the holiday? And sometimes when I tell them, well, if you just look at that week, you were with your family 24/7. No way you could have written on your novel. It's fine. And suddenly they feel, oh, maybe I'm okay. Maybe I didn't do everything wrong. Maybe I just sort of, had a sort of negative self-belief and self-talk that I didn't actually have to believe.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people, they have that issue where they're feeling like they're not being as productive as they want to be. And I think that's really normal. I think everyone faces that wherever they are. So if you're thinking about that compared to in terms of books, I think a lot of people maybe start their book and maybe don't finish it. A bit like your client there who had done 2 chapters and then hadn't finished it off. So for authors, especially who are just getting started, have you got any tips for them to help them make sure they finish their book and how to keep that on track?
I mean, in an ideal world, you have someone to hold you accountable for the time plan that you made. And maybe I should start with a time plan. If you start a novel, I know it's exciting, you want to jump right in, right? But I think, there needs to be a pocket of time to create the premise and the outline. And then you need a time plan to, at least for the first few months, to know what your rough deadlines are. And the time plan doesn't have to be perfect. It's something to go along with small milestones. And you can always adjust it on the way if you feel like, oh, I'm actually much faster or slower. Secondly, you do need a person holding you accountable. I think most of us aren't made to uphold our willpower and discipline all the time. This is what I do as a coach, of course. People, we talk each week about what the progress is and how far they got and where they got stuck. But you can also do it with a friend or with a writers group or even with a colleague. I wouldn't always recommend your life partner because they have an agenda and an interest in you being there for them and the family, so they might not help you set that boundary around your writing. But maybe someone else who you can check in with regularly and ask them to send you an email on the day when you were supposed to, finish chapter 3, like a gentle nudge. Hey, how did it go? Did you do it? And that a lot of people, they will write if they know that someone else is watching.
Yeah, I think an accountability partner is really helpful because if you imagine how you are at work, you say you're going to do some work, and if you don't do it, your manager is going to come back to you and say, where is this piece of work you said you're going to do? So it's kind of like getting someone who's going to hold you accountable and responsible for the actions you said you're going to do. I really like that. And that's one of the main things about the book I liked because it's, you've said you're going to do this. These are the steps you need to take to get to that point. And you can easily just tick them off as you go along. And it's really helpful.
Yeah.
Now, with the writing planner, it's obviously just designed to help people stay organized and motivated. So what are the main features about your writing planner you think that sets it apart from, other ways of writing and planning a book?
Well, I mean, I think I've not seen another writing planner like that really helps you create a consistent writing habit. There are lots of amazing productivity planners and habit planners, but this one is really geared for writers because I am a writer. I have been for, over 20 years now as a journalist, as an academic, and now I'm writing fiction and nonfiction alongside my day job of being a book coach. And this planner really thinks through what is the next stumbling block you could come across? Oh, not tracking your word count. Boom, there it is on the second page of your weekly spread, right? Or, for example, many writers don't check in with themselves at the end of the month with a good reflection on which habits actually worked, what totally distracted them, and what could they stop doing next month? What could they start doing to change their habits? What could they continue doing because it worked well? So it's almost like a cycle of sort of almost self-coaching. I ask the same questions to all my clients in our weekly meetings. And so I think that's it. I hope that the planner has a sort of coachy feeling where you can not just, set your goals and take them off, but also get reflecting a lot and experiment, because not every tip and every productivity advice works for everyone in exactly the same way. But you are asked to continuously reflect at the end of the week, at the end of the month. You can reflect after 90 days. And I hope that is sort of the difference. It's almost like a writer's coach without maybe the price tag, let's say.
I think basically it gets you to start to think about your writing as a business, because a lot of authors they kind of just see themselves as maybe creatives. They're just writing. They don't necessarily have a goal or any, KPIs, key performance indicators in mind. Now, obviously, You just said one there about how many words you've written. Are there any KPIs you think that you track during the book that would help to keep the author on track?
Yeah. So I always track two things. One is, how is the writing process going, and how are the habits going, and the consistency, and how many hours are you putting in? How often are you showing up for your book? And the other one is the outcomes. How many words have you written? Which chapter is still to be finished? How are you on track with your time plan? And I really want to emphasize that a lot of writers think that they only need to look at the word count, and they are only doing a good job when they are writing 2,000 words every week. And they tend to forget that in the writing process, you need time to plan, to digest, to let it sort of sink in, to do nothing, and see if there are any new ideas coming up. Like often writing needs some white space around it.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of that is part of the process of writing and your identity as a writer and how you play around with the habits. And this is what I work on mostly as a coach, because writers tend to forget that they are actually doing a good job. They are showing up for the book, even though they maybe haven't written all those words that they meant to, but they made progress in a different kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. 'Cause I think one of the main things I'm getting out of these conversations I'm having during this podcast is that I think writers maybe don't take the writing side as seriously as they need to. They are very serious about the writing, but in terms of seeing themselves as a business and making sure they are getting those word counts and hitting the targets they needed to, that seems to be the problem that comes up the most with these conversations. So by identifying, what are the targets you want to hit, for example, is it number of words? Is it number of hours? I think that could be a much better way to stay on track.
And I mean, I have some writers who are a little bit overwhelmed and burnt out. And for those writers, I sometimes ask them how often are you saying no to other things this week? Or how often have you taken a proper lunch break or stretched? So I'm very much into, quite a holistic way, because otherwise you're never going to be able to be a long-term writer. Most authors, even if they say, oh, I just want to write one book to boost my business, I'm pretty sure they're going to write more books because it's enjoyable. If you can make it enjoyable and make it a part of your life that, you don't feel constantly overwhelmed or behind, but you feel like it can fit with your life and your job and all of that. So, yeah, there is much more to, let's say, track or keep an eye on than just the word count. The word count is important, of course. You need to get to the full first draft, but the word count doesn't come from nothing. It comes from setting boundaries, keeping up the habit, making the time, and all of that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, with the book, do you think, say you're writing more than one book, or you plan to write more than one book in a year, for example, would you get one book for each of the books you're writing, one habit planner for each book, or would you combine both the books or both the targets into one planner?
I would just use one planner because it might get quite complicated. So, for example, in the Right Habit Planner, on the weekly spread, or actually everywhere, it asks you what are your top 3 goals. And I'm like a perfect example. I am doing business writing. I write blogs about productive writing and publishing a book and starting your book, and that is my nonfiction writing work. But I also write fiction for the pure fun of it, and I also write a little bit of memoir. And in the planner, there is space for these different types of goals. And, you can, let's say, that week, your first goal is finish a blog post. You write down, this is your priority number 1. Next, you are asked to break it down in the first 3 action steps. Next, you are asked to slot it into your timetable. And later you are asked to track it. And you can do that with 2 or 3 different goals. Just keep an eye on not doing too much, trying to squeeze everything in. But it's meant because no one has just one goal in life, right? There is no point in saying, what's my number 1 goal this week? There's always up to 3. If it gets more, I think there's something might, you might get overwhelmed. But up to 3 priorities of different writing projects, or even a writing project versus business projects, or even a health goal, you could put that into your planner. I sometimes do. So it's made to capture you as a whole being with, not just one goal in your head all day.
Yeah, amazing. Now, I know that you work with writers on a one-on-one basis and in group basis as well. How does that, what does that look like compared to using the book?
Yeah, so one-on-one is sort of the VIP version where I take a writer from the first idea that they have all the way through, the outline, a book proposal if they want to write one, writing all the chapters, keeping them on track, week by week, month by month. I hold them accountable. We talk through what they are writing, all the way up until they have the full first draft, and then they are ready for editing. And sometimes they want to self-edit a few rounds, and I can give tips on that. And sometimes they want to hire an editor and then sort of go along in the process. And in my group program, it's almost the same, except there is a community of writers doing that together, right? And they are all writing either a book or maybe a longer article. I have some academics that are writing big grant proposals, and they are also meeting with me every week. The only difference is really that you get more of a group feel. You get more of, the peer-to-peer support alongside my coaching, and checking in with each other and, having accountability partners. So it works. It just really depends on what type of person you are. If you want a very personalized, tailored, intensive session with Nicole, or if you really want a very guided and coached group experience so that you don't feel, either way, in both of the programs, you don't feel alone in the process.
Yeah, definitely. And when you're doing the coaching, do you follow this as the main structure to the book writing?
I do. So everyone who coaches with me gets the planner sent to their house. And sometimes people say, oh, I prefer my Google Calendar, and that's fine, right? So I'm not forcing it on anyone. But most of the people in my I have a 90-day program to finish one piece of writing. And most of the people are using the planner, and then they come into the coaching and we go deeper because maybe they have a problem with setting boundaries. Maybe they are burned out. Maybe there is another problem they have. Maybe they have their schedule is so full, they can't even see when they should be writing. And then we talk about, well, what can you kick off your calendar to make space for the writing, which nonsense meetings are in there that you could, you could skip, or where are you expecting too much of yourself? So the right habit or the right habit planner is often the basis. And then the coaching is sort of the add-on if you want more, if you need more. A lot of people actually are going to be just fine with the planner and are going to be happily finishing their book. 52 weeks, that's how long the planner is. You can definitely finish actually more than one book, I think, in that time. And some people want the extra support and just go deeper and do it faster and more efficiently. And they come into the coaching with me.
Yeah, amazing. Now, I think one last point I wanted to touch on, which you did touch on slightly at the beginning, was imposter syndrome. Because obviously people are writing a book and they think, well, I'm seeing all these amazing books I love, and I want to create one that is also just as amazing. Now, I think a lot of people, they start writing and they think, oh, I'm not a writer. I'm just mucking around, which is why I think the Write Habit, can keep people on track. But with imposter syndrome, how can authors manage that self-doubt and keep moving forward?
Yeah, 100%. I have so many clients who are already writers, but they get blocked a little bit on the way. But I also have a big portion of people who aren't writers. They have not taken a degree in writing. They've not trained in it, They might be a coach, or they might be someone who wants to write a memoir and they've just retired and they just want to tell their story. So for those people who feel like I can't do it, the first thing we talk about, why are you writing the book? And so many writers just feel like they have a story to tell that would really help someone else. It could be a story about things that went well in your life, didn't go well in your life, or, frameworks in your business that you want to give to other people in the form of a book. And if I just talk with them about, oh yeah, the book is a marketing tool, you're going to make money, that's nice. That's a good motivation. But every single person is a human being. And I often, as a coach, try to connect with the emotion behind it. At the core of everything, every single writer that I work with wants to have their voice heard. And they want to learn to trust that their story matters. You wouldn't believe how many people I have that say, well, I could write about this or that, but I don't know if anyone wants to hear it. But the fact is, we are all human beings. We want connection. We want to feel that we are not alone in something, whatever the issue is that we are writing about. And a lot of my writers, once they really dig into the deeper layer of, you are allowed to write this story, your story matters, your voice matters, that can be a real motivator. And then if it's perfect or not, is the sentence right or not, it doesn't matter anymore, because you are on the path to really connecting with other people out there who want to hear what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you are writing a book, that means you are a writer. You don't have to have this recognition from anyone. No one stops and tells you you're a writer. If you're writing it, that means you are a writer. So you should just try and avoid that self-doubt. And
you know what? That's so ridiculous. I used to be a trained journalist for 10 years, and I was a trained academic for 10 years. But throughout all that time, I never called myself a writer. And when I burned out and left academia about 4 years ago, I started writing creatively and took, some courses and met with other writers and started writing some short stories. And it was the first time that I dared to say publicly, I think I'm a writer. Can you believe how ridiculous this is after 20 years of being a trained person who can write nonfiction in different ways? I never thought of myself as a writer. I didn't think I'm allowed to say it because I wasn't a best-selling author in that way. And it was ridiculous. Everyone who, even if you are just journaling for yourself and no one ever reads it, you are a writer.
Yeah. For sure. That's such good advice. And thank you so much. Now, this book is called The Right Habit, The Writer's Planner. I've got a picture of it here. But for people on audio, they can get that book. Where is it available?
It's available on Amazon in every single country. Yep. So I have a website that leads you directly to the Amazon site. The website is called www.therighthabitplanner.com.
Yep.
And from there, you can just click on your country, or you just search for it on Amazon. If you search for Writer's Planner, you're probably going to find it as at one of the top spots.
Great. And if people want to get in touch with you to talk about anything else, then where's the best place to do that?
So a really great place is my free mini course, startyourbookin5days.com, 5 as a number. And when you sign up for this, it doesn't cost anything. It helps you to get, to an outline of your book and a writing plan. You will get emails from me, 5 emails, because it's a 5-day course. And you can just reply to any of those emails and ask me any questions, and then we can start a conversation.
Brilliant. I mean, that's such great advice. I think you're right. Habit is amazing, by the way. I think it's a really good book. I think it's going to help so many writers who are maybe struggling to find that consistency and that procrastination. So I'm so happy to be able to go through it, and I'm looking forward to filling it out myself. One thing I'd love to see is one of your filled out versions one day, so that we can see what a really good...
My filled out versions, and for those who are just listening and not seeing the video, they can sometimes be extremely messy. And I like to show this because people think, oh, I'm buying a new planner, and then they put it on their shelf and they never use it. And I just want to say, when you buy the planner, just break it in, make it ugly and messy. The later pages will look better. This is a page from early on when I used it, and I wrote all across the margins and struck out stuff because I planned my week wrong. This is part of the process. Start really messy, really break it in. Like I would hate for the planner to sit on people's desk. Yeah. And it's just sitting there, and it's another dream that is never being, used.
For me, I see it more as, when you're at school and you start the year and you get one of those new books, it's got those clean pages in, and you start writing in it. It's just like that. You're meant to get in, stick things in it, write stuff down, and it gets better as you go along, because you want to be able to read through it later so you can see back at exactly what you've achieved. So I think it's a really great resource. So thank you so much for making it. Well, it's been great chatting to you. Just before we go, we've got one final question. And what is a book that you recommend everyone should be reading?
So I really love the book Essentialism by Greg McEwan. He actually wrote a blurb for the Right Habit Planner. At one of the front pages, he said how great the planner is, and I was so happy and proud. But his book Essentialism is all about how to find out what really matters in your life, and to make space for it and focus on the essential things rather than getting distracted. And as a writer, of course, that book spoke to me massively, and it helped me to really focus in on my writing, my business, my coaching. So Essentialism by Greg McEwan is fantastic.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for that recommendation. I'll check that one out. And we'll put a link to your book in the notes, and a link to your website as well. So if anyone wants to check those out, and I highly recommend you get that planner. That's great value. Thank you very much, Nicole, and we'll speak again soon.
Bye. Thank you, Teddy.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales, but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximize your book's potential on Amazon, then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalized ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively. And Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1.